Okay. Good morning, everybody. Thank you all for getting up really early this morning to attend this meeting. Thank you for coming, Ms. Nixon. We're glad to see you again. Let's start with the call to order. Did I forget something? Okay. Let's do the adoption of the agenda. I'll need a motion to adopt our agenda as presented.
So moved.
Thank you, Dan. Second. You that second.
Second.
Bill, discussion. Okay, all in favor of this motion signify with aye.
Aye.
All right, it looks like we voted to adopt the motion. All right, we have a presentation this morning by the most wonderful Ms. Nixon regarding our fiscal.
Is there another Miss Nixon that's not wonderful?
Yeah, probably.
Just curious.
Probably. She's going to present our fiscal year 2024 audit, and subsequent discussion by the city council will follow. Take it away, Ms. Nixon.
Okay, well, thank you for having me here this morning. And I will tell you that everything went well with the audit. I know you all voted on that last minute budget amendment, and that helped the city not have a compliance finding. So thank you for that call meeting. We kind of waited on that before we finished up. There were, everything went very well. This probably, one of the best years, I would say, between Karen and Jason that we've had as far as adjusting entries and things like that. So I think that the flow of the office is going very well. And so you can feel good about that. There were a couple of GASB statements, and those are governmental accounting statements that kind of came into the audit this year that were changes or updates. And one was on error corrections and just saying that anytime there's a update on a standard, they want us to go back and look and see if we have to adjust the prior period. The one statement that was effective was on compensated absences, and the city already is accruing for compensated absences, and that statement just encompasses everything: vacation, sick leave, any other type of leave, but there were no effects on your prior net position. So we did not have to make a prior period adjustment on that. But those were the changes, and you'll see that referenced in the audit and the note disclosures. So just wanted to point that out. I want to go over the slides first, and then I'm going to point out in the audit just some pages for you to look at that might be of interest to you. So at any time, if you have questions, just
We'll sing out. We will sing out.
Yes. But on slide 3, we're gonna just go over the government-wide. So this is everything. This is general fund, T-SPOS, and your enterprise fund. So total revenues for the city in 2024 were almost 3.2 million, and you'll see total expenses at around 2.9. Both of those were increases over the prior year, and you can see there's a 3-year comparative there, definitely an increase over fiscal year 22. We're going to dig a little bit deeper into those as we go. But total revenue increased by 5% over 23, and the expenses increased by 16%. So as far as debt on slide 5, there was one new debt obtained. It was a lease on 2 police vehicles. There was no payment made on that before the end of the year, so that's actually set up on an annual basis, and that annual payment started this year. But other than that, you have the 2 GFA notes in your enterprise fund. So this debt service ratio continues to decrease because of that. So you'll see it's at 4.02% for 24.
Before we go on, the percentage of revenue increase and the percentage of expenses, is that typical throughout the years, or are higher or lower than average on
Well,
that
you'll
discrepancy?
see, based on,
Yeah.
I mean, the revenue really increased a lot from 22 to 23, and primarily when you think about it, T-SPOS just kicked in. It started in 22, T-SPOS did, and so in 23, a lot of that T-Splosh was coming in, same in 24, so not as much of a variance between 23 and 24, but that's why there was such a big increase. Expense-wise, because of the T-Splosh, there's been a lot of paving infrastructure work being done, so that's why you're seeing, you know, the increase in the expense in those areas compared to 22. But I would say T-Splosh has been a good thing for
Amen.
You do not disagree.
and hopefully the citizens think so too.
Yeah, that comes up in November, we hope.
Yeah. Leverage just addresses, and this is on slide 6, just how much of your total assets are financed by long-term debt. In 24, the city added over $737,000 in capital assets, and bringing the total capital assets to just over 9.8 million. And they comprise about 56% of your total assets. But again, you have the 2 JICA loans that you've had for a long time.
Yes, we have.
And one's at a 0% interest rate. And then the only other new loan was in the general fund. So the lease, and we're gonna talk about that next. So on slide 8, we're looking at general fund only. And you will see the revenues in general fund did decrease a little, about 1.426. I mean, it went down about, 23,000, 22,000 from 23. Expenses did increase to about 1.7. Now, what's not included in that total revenue, because this is just the fund only, is you had other financing sources. So there were some things that happened last year that aren't typical, and that is you had a big sale of assets. You sold some property, and that brought in almost $186,000. And you also, of course, the finance purchases, those proceeds from there were over 100,000. So that loan was 100,270 for the 2 police vehicles. And then you also have some transfer coming over from your hotel motel.
Right.
And that was close to 61,000. So when you're looking at revenue and expenses, it looks like there's a huge gap there, but when you consider the other financing sources that came in, it narrows that gap down. So any questions on that?
Generally speaking, without those other sources of revenue, what we continue to see is the general fund revenues kind of becoming flat, but expenses are escalating,
Yes.
which is kind of what's happening everywhere, right?
Which, yes, and your revenue, you'll see like on the revenue slide, I didn't do a comparison between 23 and 24 between those revenues because they didn't change much. So at all. So your revenue percentages, I mean, your property or taxes in general are 80% of the bulk of the general fund revenue, which is no surprise. The grants made up about 7%, and your investment earnings and sale of assets were about 8%, and then your charges for services 5%, and that includes like your licensing and permits and things like that. But that, yes, your revenue is pretty flat. But you are gonna see expenses are increasing. And if you go, well, you have your revenue slide on 9 that I just kind of referenced. On 10, when we talk, on page 10, when we talk about the expenses, you're gonna see the bulk of your expenses. You have police and courts make up about 35%. The general administration is 29% of that. And then public works would be your other major big one at 21%. But if you look at the comparison between the two on page 11, the increase, it really wasn't in the general government. You have police and courts increasing there, and your public works and streets, which are typical. The public works and streets, I mean, all that has gone up. I mean, that's where you're accounting for your fuel and, all that. So any questions on general fund so far? Okay, again with this, as far as general fund assets and long-term debt, you know, we talked about the lease for the 2 police vehicles. Those annual payments, by the way, are $23,558. That start in 2025, so that's why you see that leverage ratio go up over 22 and 23. It's because of that new loan. And 23 completely had a lease that you completely paid off. So, and that's typical, you know, because you have to replace those cars. So I generally am used to seeing when a lease runs out, another lease picks up. Any questions? I do have a SPOS slide in here, and I'm mainly comparing T-SPOS, but I do want to point out when you look at this 3-year, there was a little bit of just regular SPOS revenue in 22. It wasn't very much. It was like over $78,000. So you can kind of see, Bruce, this is where that T-SPOS comes into play. You can see that gap in the revenue. So in 24, the revenue brought in from that was over $674,000. And of course, the expenses are keeping up, and I would expect to see that. I mean, you're going to use it. You've got the money, you're going to use it on your paving infrastructure. So, any questions on that? Okay, on your water and sanitation fund, your investment. This one, so total revenues, if you go to page 16, you'll see actually decreased a little bit. They're around 775,000. Expenses increased. They were around 986,000. So a considerable increase in that over the prior 2 years. And I guess the important one that I think you all need to look at is how much of you charge for these services and how much are they covering of your expenses. And you can kind of see in 24, that ratio is going down. But you all are also getting prepared for the sewer infrastructure. And I know there's some grants coming in. So there's been some expenditures in this fund to kind of help prepare and get ready for that. So, but I do think you need to be aware that your charges for services, I mean, has gone down to 74%. So you're only able to cover about 74% of the expenses in that fund based on the revenue you're bringing in. Okay.
I'm wondering how much of that is because of the extraordinary number of leaks we had over the last year.
I'm sure that plays
A lot of
into it.
repairs.
But as costs continue to go up, as I've discussed or been discussed in previous meetings, we know that our rates need to be looked at. In fact, EMI is in process of finalizing a rate study for us. I've been waiting for that to bring before you all, but that's something that's been well discussed. Hopefully our citizen will not be surprised by that, but we do know that that's something that we're gonna have to look at very soon.
Any questions on that? Okay. In this fund on page 18, your debt service ratio continues to decrease as you make the principal payments on those 2 Jeep loans. So it's 11% for 24. As far as how much of your total assets are leveraged by that debt, it's 25% of them. So not bad at all on
And
that.
these are still the enterprise fund.
Yes. And on the very last slide, your capital ratio continues to go down to 40%. A higher ratio is going to suggest that you're investing in that. And the only worry here is, and it's everybody's concern, is infrastructure. You know, it's old and it's very expensive to replace. But, you know, probably with proper planning, that is something that needs to be. And I know you guys are talking about that, but that is why you're seeing that ratio go down there. Any questions?
Say we're investing capital assets, that's an oxymoron, but
You're what?
I said, I love it that you say that we're investing in capital assets.
Well, that, you know, that Well, that ratio shows how, yeah.
It's not much of an investment.
No. It is so
Not
expensive.
paying dividends.
Yeah, you're not taking returns.
You know, in the audit, you have your various statements on this up here, but I want to point, you know, I think the notes, you can glean a lot of information that drill down in the notes that I wanted to show you and highlight. As far as your assets, that start on page 26. This is all the governmental activities. So this shows, and you can see where in the governmental, and this includes T-SPOS, general fund, all that, over $707,000 was spent in capital. And most of that, the bulk of that was your infrastructure. Okay, and infrastructure includes your paving, your drainage, but it's mostly like the paving that's going on in that.
Culverts and all that.
Culverts,
Yeah.
yes. So you can see that. The enterprise fund, the water sewer, there wasn't as much spent on that, and that's on page 27. There was $30,000. I believe that was a shared, that's actually a shared vehicle. That was allotted to that fund. But that, to me, you kind of can see where the bulk of your assets are, what you're spending on your assets. And then the page after that on 28, you know, has your debt. You can see where the beginning balances are, ending balances are at the top of that page, and what additions there were. So the additions, you know, you see the finance purchase, which was the lease. And then you can see the payable on the business fund and the business type activities for the note, the JIFA notes. So you see that ending balance for the JIFA notes is around 853,000. And then you have underneath that at the bottom, you know, what the principal payments are going to be over the next 5 years for both the lease and you'll see the JIFA. So the JIFA loans actually go through 2033.
Unfortunately, yes.
And they need another one before
It's
then.
not unfortunate with that 0%.
The 0% is good, yeah.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah, yeah.
Yes, and the annual payments on that is around 65.
I would love to be signing those checks monthly. Yeah.
But any specific things that you all want to go over?
Just a tangential question back on page 14. That was the T-SPOS chart, and it shows that as usual, we don't spend right up to the limit. So does the leftover T-SPOS money go into our general fund? Does it go into our surplus?
No,
Is it-
you'll spend it.
It stays in the T-SPOS
Stays in the
fund.
T-SPOS, yeah. Those are restricted, so
Yeah.
you have to
Yes.
use it for what
Yeah, it
was,
does not go to
yeah,
the general.
the
fund.
project, what the
Okay.
project was voted on by the voters, so you have to use it for that.
Okay, but as you can see, the revenues exceed the expenses in the chart, and
A little bit, yes, but there's some planning that goes along with that. I mean, obviously in your last year, you know, whatever comes in, I mean, you might not want to spend all the revenue in the first year because there's
Okay.
some things that will happen, you know, as the years go by that you
What
haven't.
if?
We keep a cushion.
So there is a little bit, but I guarantee you that last year, I see it in every SPOS that ends, that last year, they're spending it up.
Okay.
So,
thank you.
You have a report, Curtis, with the balance of that account among that paperwork right there.
Okay, thank you.
About $275,000 in that account right now.
So overall, without T-SPOS, we would be really challenged
T-SPOS is helping a lot, because, you know,
maintaining our infrastructure.
Yes.
especially with the aging infrastructure that we have.
Right.
So then when you take that out and you look at the escalation of just operating expense.
But let's be clear though, that T-Splosh is the transportation, so it's not gonna replace your water pipes.
Right.
So,
So off of that and onto the general fund expenditures, operating expenditures, those, with the inflation we have going on. And as those costs continue to escalate and we're essentially flat on the other revenues, really presents a business model challenge going forward that we need to really pay attention to. And, we're having a meeting tomorrow to talk about some future appropriate development here, which would really add to the tax base, which we sorely need to get to a critical mass to offset those escalating expenses. So I think it's something as a council we need to pay attention to for sure. And that needs to be the communication to our citizens.
And also our water rate study, because we know legally, Georgia says we can't lose money in our water fund.
How do our infrastructure costs compare to other small cities?
oh, they're all the same. Outrageous, I think. but-
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're not suffering alone, is what you're saying?
No.
that
I
make you
mean,
feel better?
and,
No.
the smaller municipalities, they have the oldest infrastructure. I mean, it's been there for 50 years or more, and now you've got there was some replacement back in when these Duke loans were first taken out, and you'll see if it goes through 2033, you're gonna need to do something before then. Especially if you bring in new development, right?
One loan was 2011 and the other one was 2013.
2013. So, but no, that's not all. Everybody's kind of staring at
We
those
could
numbers.
use the city of Atlanta's formula and increase our water rates by 10% a year for the next 10 years.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
We can bring that up tomorrow.
Yeah, it'd go over well.
It was-
I think you're on the agenda for that.
Unfortunately, that's what we're trying to avoid. by
Exactly.
Improving the base of the taxes with some of that future proposed development. So that we don't get into a situation where either we have to do that or some of the city services need to get cut back.
We just need to be aware that, as we increase the investment here in anticipation of some of those revenues, our costs could go up too. And traditionally, as your city grows, it doesn't, the increased revenue doesn't cover the cost of increased services. Is that true? I mean, I would add this.
I think that's pretty.
Well, that's a
common sense.
balancing act we've got to work on.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. We just need to be very aware of the cost of increased services for those things.
Sure.
So it puts more emphasis on homework we're gonna have to do proposing budgets.
Right.
I think right now, Jason is talking about preparing us two possible budgets for next year, one with T-Splosh and one without, so, yeah. Is that
Yes,
kind of sum it up? Yeah.
good luck.
Well, is Raven County doing a regular SPOS?
We already did
They-
it.
Yeah, we did that.
That was passed last November.
Yeah.
The current SPOS, I think, is expiring this month or next month.
Yeah.
So that should start, I think there's 85 days it has to wait.
Yeah.
So that the new SPOS will go into effect probably around October. So we should start seeing that in November, December this year.
And we get close to
And
600,000.
if the
Yeah.
the T-Splosh will be back on the referendum for this November. If that passes, and hopefully the voters will see the value and will, we will start seeing that money pick back up around April of next year.
So we're
So
hoping to see $3 million from this. We're still negotiating with the county.
Well, the good thing about those is they involve anybody who's coming to visit.
Right,
You know, it's not just the burden on
no.
the citizens that are here.
And
so-
since tourism is number one here, yeah, a lot of the tourism.
All great questions.
Jason's gonna be at the front entrance with the sandwich board that says vote for the T-Splosh. Isn't that right?
I've been told I can't solicit for it, but
Yeah.
I can educate, so.
Yeah.
I do think that's the important thing, is making sure that your citizens are educated on it.
Right,
And
Well,
what
you
would
talk
it look like
about
if you didn't have it?
Well, we rolled the millage rate back 3 years in a row
oh, yeah.
because we've been able to offset all those road expenditures that typically come out of the general fund. Have been able to defer that to the T-Splosh, so that, they should see that. So hopefully that's, of course, everything we do, we get now, I call it NASCAR style. We slap stickers paid by T-Splosh, we put up signs funded by T-Splosh. We do everything we can to just, again, educate.
Educate.
The word educate, so yeah.
Yeah, we're negotiating next week with the county.
All good stuff.
We're still okay, but we gotta work.
Yes.
To get more of it, yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I guess we don't have anybody online, do we? We do. Are there any questions from our participants online? Nope. All right. Thank you for
y'all.
coming to see us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take the rest of the day off. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay.
Okay.
Are we adjourned?
Well, we will be.
Okay, I'll
Over there,
We're there.
make a motion that we adjust.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We are officially off the record now. Thank you.